Hi, this is Cody Petrie. I'm here with
Danielle Dozer
and Taylor Ahrensdorf and Rachael Marshall, and we're here to show you our program that we put together using Excel and VBA. Our program is a hiking-based program. It's catered towards hikers in the Tucson area. So before we actually break down the different components of the program, we're going to just start by showing you an example of how it would be used. So when the program is actually opened, or I should say when the Excel spreadsheet's opened, the user would see something just like this. It's a very simple empty spreadsheet with only two buttons here. The first is Plan Today's Hike and the other is a Reset button. The Reset button is simply used prior to running the program every time. So we're going to go ahead and get started by clicking on the Plan Today's Hike button, which will initialize our user form. So if we click on Plan Today's Hike, we see our user form pop up here. And we have a few options that we can punch in that will kind of get us to output the data that we want. So we're going to start with our name, and in this case I'll use my own. And then we come down to this combo box right here, and we have three options. These are all different trail names, as the label says to the side here, and they're all trails from the Sabino Canyon area of Tucson. So we've got Telephone Line, Seven Falls, and East Fork Trail. We're going to go ahead and say that we want to do the Seven Falls hike. After that, we come down here and we can pick the date of the hike. This is a good time to note that we are actually using 2010 data in this example, and that's purely just to show off the fact that this can be used over the span of an entire year. If we had been using 2012, we wouldn't have data obviously for any dates further than that day of the year. So like I said, 2010 data, but we're going to go ahead and pull up today's date of 2010, which is March 19th. And after that, we move on to a few options that we have down here. These options include elevation plot, weather info, and area model. They're exactly what they sound like. These are different output options that the user can choose to have come up after the form is run. So we're going to do all three. And then we're going to go ahead and run the program. Okay. Start. So now we go ahead and click Accept, and we pop up with a message box here. The very first line is very simple. It says, "Enjoy your hike, Cody Petrie," what the user entered into the name box. And then we've got two more lines that pop up right below it. The maximum temperature right here and the minimum temperature. Both of these are on the date that we selected, and they give the value of temperature in degrees from our internet data source. Degrees Celsius, I should say. Now there would be a fourth line here if our internet data source had indicated that there would be rainfall on the day that we selected. However, the internet data source said that there would not be rainfall, and thus this line is actually missing from the message box. So we're going to go ahead and click OK now, which initializes the second part of the program, at which point we have two of our boxes pop up. And these two charts right here are the other options that the user selected in their checkboxes. The first is an elevation plot, and the second is an elevation model. The elevation model is mainly just kind of for the fun of getting a chance to see a little bit different view of how the actual hike goes along the mountainside or along the valley. The first one is a lot more usable from just a data perspective because we can actually see an elevation plot of the trail. All of these are individual data points taken from an original map. We have our latitude and our longitude here, so we can actually see how the hiker or the user would move along the trail. And we've got our key here to indicate the different elevation levels. So now we've seen that our program provides the user with two different versions of an elevation plot, along with weather data and even rainfall data for the hike that they select on the date that they selected. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and break down how we did this and the different components of the code and the VBA that went into creating this very successful user form. So we're going to start with our models here while they're up on the screen. Let's start with the elevation model down here at the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and select that for a second so that it's highlighted and scroll down here. Now, like I said, this one's kind of more just for the user's enjoyment. Our screen's fairly zoomed out right now, but if it were to be zoomed in a little bit farther, you would actually be able to see the latitude and longitude movements side to side as the entire chart gains elevation. It's kind of interesting to see, and it actually kind of gives the feel of the actual mountainside that the hiker will be traversing. So let's see where we pulled our data from. Our data for both of these elevation plots comes from another worksheet here titled Trail Data down here at the bottom. This trail data includes latitude, longitude, and elevation for each of our three hikes. All of this was pulled from different internet sources. So let's just take a look at, let's see, which one did we have open? we had 7 Falls open. So 7 Falls is pulling its data for both of those elevation plots right here from this latitude and longitude, moving down all the way through a total of 63 data points. So it's very accurate data. I mean, as you can see in our elevation plots here, we've got a lot of different data points to give kind of a smooth graph for the user. So out of our 2 elevation plots, the elevation model down here at the bottom is simplest. As I just demonstrated, it just basically pulls the data from this worksheet. A little bit more complex is our elevation plot up here. As I stated before, just to be clear, there's a specific elevation plot for each of our 3 different hikes, but in this case we're just looking at the 7 Falls elevation plot. We modified the data that this chart is pulling in from our trail data worksheet using VBA to provide elevation color coding for each of our data points. So let's go ahead and look at our VBA behind that color coding process right now. We're going to go over here to the Developer Tool tab and pull up our editor and take a look at our different macros here.
So here we have our Module 1 code for the actual elevation plots. As you can see, we have elevation 7 Falls, we have the subroutine for telephone line, and we have the subroutine for East Fork. We dimension our variables at the top like you would for most subroutines, and then the first for next loop right here, this finds the minimum value of the elevation, and this is important because what we want is a very concise color pattern that goes from the lowest elevation at the minimum value to the highest, so it goes from green to yellow. And then what we have here is the outputting, and this activates the proper chart and colors the legend according to the elevation, as you can see in the comments. So what we're going to have here is the legend's going to have each correct color, and then it's going to have the min, the middle, and then the max. And then the last for next loop here is going to actually color the data points. So you're going to have it, so each point is going to be colored according to where it stands with the elevation. So the lowest one, like I said before, would be bright green here, as you can see here, and then as you keep going up, it becomes lighter and lighter shades until it goes to about a strong yellow.
So that covers the basics of the VBA that goes into our color coding of the elevation plots. Before we move on to the coding that goes into our user form, let's finish up with a little bit more of our Module 1 coding. The last thing in our Module 1 code, if I pull that up here real quick, let's see. Here we are. After we go through all of our color coding elevation plots, we get down here to our Get Hike Weather program. This is just pulled exactly out of the homeworks that we've done prior in the term. We just changed a few different components of it here. We're pulling in information from the first station, which is Tucson, of 2010. Like I said, we use 2010 so that we have an entire year's worth of data to use. If we had used 2012, we would have a little bit less data. So this program right here, as you can see when we ran the user form, it pulled in all of our weather information here, nice and pretty. We've got 2010, and we've got a few different titles here that we put in just to make things a little bit easier for us if we happen to be actually looking at the raw data. However, typically the user will never actually look at this page. They'll be staying on our hiker's friend page, and they'll never actually really look at the weather unless maybe they were tweaking the program themselves. But this is where our weather data is inputted from the internet, and this is actually what our user form references when it's pulling up the max temp, the min temp, and the rainfall in our message box. So the coding that goes into this is a little bit complex, so let's start with our Module 1 code just to keep things started from the beginning. So if I pull up our Module 1 right here, this is our Get Hike Weather. Very simple, like I said, straight out of the homework. We use an array, we define our different columns, we pull in the information from the internet and delimit it so that it is separated into the different columns. So that's pretty basic. But if we move on now to the actual code that goes into the user form, that's where we see how that information is pulled in for our user as they're entering that into the form. And that's where it gets a little bit tricky. So we're going to look at that now. Done.